Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cavs Insider. I'm Dan Labbe. The Cavaliers on to the second round after a 101-93 win over the Boston Celtics on Sunday. They await the winner of the Chicago Bulls and the Milwaukee Bucks. We're going to talk about that, but really what we're going to talk about is everything that went down yesterday. Of course, losing Kevin Love to a shoulder injury. At the time of this recording, we don't know the extent of that injury. There have been reports that he could miss as much as 2 weeks. We will talk to Chris Fedor about that. We'll talk to Joe Vardon about that. We're hoping to get Chris Haynes on the line. We'll see if that actually happens. He's been a very busy man. But as promised, let's go ahead and bring in Chris Fedor right now via phone. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dan. What's going on, bud?
Not too much. So let's go ahead and start with Kevin Love. Kelly Olynyk, a lot has been made of that play. There's been photos going around about Kevin Love kind of doing the same thing to Olynyk. Those have been going around for a couple days, or since yesterday. What did you think of that play? Was it a dirty play by Olynyk?
Dan, I'm not going to go as far as to say dirty. I thought it was a dangerous play. I thought it was an unfortunate result for Kevin Love. I understand his frustration. I understand why fans are frustrated. But I think if we're talking dirty plays, I think the conversation has to start with Kendrick Perkins, and it has to start with J.R. Smith, too. Because grappling happens in the NBA, and fighting for a loose ball happens in the NBA. Did Kelly Olynyk cross the line and carry it a little bit too far and hang on to Kevin Love's arm for a little bit too long? Absolutely. And he was called for a loose ball foul, and something more probably should happen to Kelly Olynyk. But I'm not going to go as far as to call that one dirty, because I know that how that play started is how things go sometimes in the NBA. I think Kelly Olynyk was trying to prevent Kevin Love from getting the loose ball. I think maybe even Kelly Olynyk was trying the crafty play, the veteran move, and trying to get a loose ball foul called against Kevin Love and not the other way around. Those kinds of things happen throughout the course of the game. A punch does not happen throughout the course of an NBA game. It happens in boxing. It happens in MMA. And both Kendrick Perkins and J.R. Smith took a swipe at the opposing player. Those, to me, are classified as dirty plays.
Let's talk about the J.R. Smith thing, because Kendrick Perkins, look, when he came into that game, that's what he came into that game for, and you can survive without Kendrick Perkins. J.R. Smith, Chris, he's got to know better. He's got to know that the Cavs have another game and the Celtics don't. He can't do what he did to Jay Crowder.
You're absolutely right, Dan. He is so important to this team, and this team has transformed into a three-point shooting team, a team that wants to space the court. And now if you take J.R. Smith's lethal three-point shot away and his floor spacing away, just the threat that he brings to this team, not to mention, Dan, his increased effort on the defensive end and on the glass as well. J.R. Smith not being on this team is going to hurt, and they're going to have to transform themselves in a different kind of way on the fly here before a series against Chicago. So, yes, he does have to be smarter, but this is the problem with J.R. Smith, Dan. It's why he was always a risk, and I admit that he's been on his best behavior since coming from the Knicks, and his redemption story has been nice to see unfold, but it's been unfolding during a time when the Cavs have not been facing any adversity. This team hasn't seen any adversity since mid-January. So it's easy to be on your best behavior and be a model citizen when things are going well. I want to see how a guy is going to respond in the face of adversity. I want to see how a guy is going to respond in pressure situations when things are tougher and things get more physical. And unfortunately, J.R. Smith did not respond in the way that he has responded since becoming a Cleveland Cavalier. He responded like he was back in New York or back in Denver. And it's the frustrating thing about J.R. Smith. And now he's going to cost his team dearly going into this series against Chicago. How the Bulls are going to be able to defend the Cavs is going to be determined a lot by how the NBA comes down on J.R. Smith. And it was a cheap shot. It was despicable, and he should be embarrassed by his actions because you simply cannot throw a punch in the NBA and expect to have the NBA have a light punishment for you.
Now the Cavaliers likely playing the Chicago Bulls. They have Game 5 tonight in Chicago. If that series ends tonight, Game 1 will be Saturday. If the series gets extended, Game 1 would be on Monday, whoever that would be against. But let's talk about Chicago specifically. If you don't have Kevin Love, if you don't have J.R. Smith, that takes away one of the Cavs' advantages, and that's the ability to bring a guy like Joakim Noah away from the basket.
You're absolutely right, Dan, especially when it comes to Kevin Love. I thought going into any series against Chicago, Love was going to be the second most important player for this team, right behind LeBron James, even more so than Kyrie Irving, just because of what you mentioned. You want to be able to make Paul Gasol and Joakim Noah uncomfortable. You want to dictate how Chicago has to defend you. And the minute that Kevin Love goes out on the floor, he's a threat. And it might have forced Tom Thibodeau to limit the minutes of Noah or maybe even Gasol and have to play a guy like Niko Mirotic because of his versatility to get out to the three-point line and guard. Not to mention, Dan, Kevin Love is the best rebounder that the Cavs have. He's better than Tristan Thompson. He's better than Timofey Mozgov. And Chicago's a team that can battle on the glass. They've got Gasol. They've got Taj Gibson. They've got Joakim Noah. So now not only are you talking about taking away a versatile power forward, somebody who can pull defenders away from the basket, you're talking about potentially being without your best rebounder against a team that is tough, physical, and defensive-minded. It is a huge loss for the Cavs. And I don't know how long Kevin Love is going to be out for. I think the Cavs are going to have their hands full with the Bulls to begin with, given the way that Chicago has played, given the way that Chicago is healthy. And now you throw Love's loss into the equation, and that advantage that the Cavs had, a number of those advantages all of a sudden disappear, and they're going to have to reinvent this thing on the fly. That's tough to do in the postseason.
Yeah, and Chris, how do they, let's say Kevin Love is out, a week, 2 weeks, something. He's going to miss maybe 3 games of the series, 4 games of the series. How do they replace him? What do they do? Who comes off the bench and fills in for him? Because obviously Tristan Thompson has been very good, but he doesn't offer you the shooting.
Yep.
Mozgov has to stay out of foul trouble, obviously. Where do they find that guy to kind of replace some of what Kevin Love can do offensively?
Man, Dan, there are so many layers to this question. There really are. And David Blatt's going to make his money in this series against Chicago. Here's the thing that I would say. I think it's extremely difficult. The way that this team wants to attack defenses, it's going to be extremely difficult to play both Mozgov and Thompson for a number of minutes at the same time because they lose that spacing and they lose that threat of an offensive player. So if we start there, knowing how much the Cavs value spacing, I would think that James Jones might be the starting power forward in more of a small ball lineup, or at least play a majority of minutes, because that way they still have that shooter out there that is going to affect how Chicago chooses to guard the Cavs. There's another layer to this, though, too, Dan, because the other option that the Cavs had before J.R. Smith lost his cool is the Cavs could have done what they did against Boston yesterday. They could have shifted LeBron to the power forward spot, and then he could have played more in the post, more below the free throw line, helped you out on the rebounds, and got tough and physical inside. And then you could have played Iman Shumpert at the small forward and then J.R. Smith at the shooting guard spot. That's what the Cavs were doing yesterday against Boston, and it was effective because of how well Iman Shumpert was playing. But now, if you talk about maybe being without J.R. Smith, and he should be suspended at least 2 games, in my opinion, that changes a little bit of what you can do out there on the perimeter, because that means you'd have to dust off a guy like Mike Miller, who hasn't gotten a lot of run, maybe dust off a guy like Sean Marion to play the small forward spot while LeBron plays the power forward. So the combination of Love being out because of his shoulder injury for however long he's going to be out, and J.R. Smith being suspended, that combination is really what's going to hurt the Cavs, and their versatility that's been so effective in the last couple of months of the regular season, that's going to take a hit as well.
David Blatt, a rookie head coach, he's going to face some adversity going into what should be a very difficult series against most likely the Chicago Bulls, even if it's Milwaukee at this point. If they somehow do the unthinkable and come back to win that series, that could suddenly be a very difficult series without a guy like Kevin Love. Chris, thanks for joining us.
You got it, Dan. Certainly wasn't the celebration that everybody was hoping for after 5 years without the playoffs, that's for sure.
That is true. But still, on to the second round. That was Chris Fedor. We're going to have Joe Vardon on momentarily. And Chris and I touched on it J.R. Smith likely facing a suspension. I don't know if I necessarily agree on going 2 games on the suspension, but he certainly deserves at least 1 game. And for J.R. Smith, it's one of those situations where, come on, man, you got to know better. You got to know that you're up 3-0. You got nothing to gain by doing what you did to Jay Crowder. I know it was in the moment, but it can be very difficult sometimes, and he's put his team in a very difficult position as well. We are going to now bring in our Cavaliers beat reporter via phone, Chris Haynes, shortly here on Cavs Insider. He'll join us to talk about the injury to Kevin Love, whether he thought it was a dirty play, what Kelly Olynyk did. He'll get his thoughts on J.R. Smith. A lot to talk about as we prepare for a potential second-round matchup against either Chicago or Milwaukee. Now, as I said, that series will start on Saturday if Chicago finishes things off tonight. If things continue past tonight, the Cavs will play the winner of the Bulls and the Bucks on Monday. Both those, of course, that game would be at Quicken Loans Arena. It's an interesting series because they've all been close games. They've all been physical games. So it'll be interesting to see what Milwaukee and Jason Kidd can dial up tonight against Chicago. See if they can get this thing into a 6th game. Then you start talking about maybe getting a 6th game out to a 7th game. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the thing probably ends tonight. But the Cavaliers are awaiting their second-round opponent, and they will likely have to do it without Kevin Love, without J.R. Smith in that first game. Full coverage of that series and yesterday's series at cleveland.com/Cavs. We've got a post-game podcast. You got to hear what Dennis Maniloff had to say after that game. If you guys know D-Man, he's a fiery guy. He gets fired up about stuff, and he went on a nice little rant yesterday about the play that injured Kevin Love. So if you get cleveland.com/Cavs, look for the post-game podcast that I did with Dennis Maniloff. He spent about 5 or 6 minutes just pure D-Man going on a rant. All right, let's switch gears, and now we will bring in another member of our Cavaliers team, Joe Vardon. Joe, how are you?
Well, I'm cold because Cleveland's weather is terrible, so there's that. And then I am looking forward to tonight where I will make the largest bowl of popcorn maybe ever made and curling up on the couch for Game 5 in Chicago.
Yeah, that has been actually a really fun series. I don't know how much of it you've actually been able to see with covering the Cavaliers. It's been an entertaining series, all series long. It's been fun, and the Cavs will play the winner of that series, likely Chicago. And Joe, they're going to probably have to do it without Kevin Love, at least for part of the series. J.R. Smith, at least for Game 1 of that series, we think. How different is this team without those two guys?
Yeah, they're hugely different. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. You know, the Cavs have been the best team in the NBA since January 15th. But it's because of this, like, sort of the totality of who they had. It wasn't just LeBron. Now, you know, LeBron's the number one difference maker, and that's also true, no doubt. But he was better this year with JR on the team and, you know, Kevin there, of course, but with JR than he was without it. And so, you know, this does it. It's, you know, it's different. Is it the end? No, not necessarily. But this is a challenge that I don't think can be overstated.
Joe, a lot of talk has been, you know, how much the officials played a role in all of this. And I'm kind of looking at my Twitter timeline right now while we're on the show, and a lot of people are saying the officials let this thing get out of hand. You go back to Game 3, how physical that was, and the start of Game 4. It was very clear Boston wanted to play those two games very physical. David Blatt, as well, pointed out the officials. You wrote about that. How much blame do the officials actually deserve?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they deserve some, and, you know, the NBA can't find me. I would remember thinking to myself during Game 3 that this is precisely how you get a star player hurt. And of course it ended up happening, you know, but that was, you know, the way that Kevin got hurt was unique, certainly. But yeah, I mean, I think they do. I just think that, that allowing that kind of play to go on unchecked, asks for trouble. And I mean, I've also said, I've written at times, I've sort of talked about how the Cavs needed to be more forceful in their defense of their own players. And what you end up seeing was that yesterday with Perk decking Crowder and then J.R. Smith, laying him out. And they probably went over the line on that as well. But it all goes back to this whole idea of letting these guys play this way. And, there's certainly examples of where the officials just didn't do a good job, and here are two, and they're both from yesterday. Forgetting about Game 3, Isaiah Thomas two-hand pushed Tristan Thompson out of bounds yesterday. It was a loose ball play. Isaiah made no effort whatsoever to get the basketball. The refs did not call it. That's outrageous, and that leads to another retaliation if the Cavs wanted to. I mean, you can't do that kind of stuff. And then the second one was JR, like moments before he totally did the wrong thing in smacking Crowder like he did, but Crowder was hammering him. I mean, he was twice it just laid his forearm right into him. And, it was before the ball was in the air. I mean, you just can't do that. And, whoever's supposed to be watching the lane let it go twice, and Smith responded. I don't agree at all with the way that Smith responded, and I think he should be suspended, probably for more than one. Well, certainly for more than one game, I would say, because you can't do that either. But the refs let it get to that point.
Joe, kind of lost in all of this, LeBron James, his series, 27 points per game, 9 rebounds, 6.5 assists, 2.3 steals. The real only downside of his series was turnovers. He had a lot of those. But LeBron James was LeBron James in this series. It's a big reason why the Cavaliers swept.
Yeah, he was. And the thing that I love about his series is the rebounds. 9 rebounds a game. That's fantastic. And that makes them better when he is that aggressive. It's actually, Dan, it's to the point where I thought during the series that the Cavs, it was a little awkward with some of the other guys that LeBron was hitting the glass so hard. It's almost like Kevin and Timofey didn't know how to respond to LeBron crashing the boards like they did. Like there was more than one occasion where they were going up for the ball and were a little surprised that it was LeBron coming down with it. But that's really good that he's that active, and he's just really involved. I didn't love the way he shot it yesterday, but he was great in the fourth quarter, and that's when it matters the most. He was just fantastic. And, yeah, he had too many turnovers a couple times, but, 2 of the turnovers he had yesterday, one, he got hit from behind on an inbounds play. That just can't happen. And another terrible, terrible job from the officials there. And then on the very next one, where he's trying to throw the ball to Kyrie Irving on the inbounds, and Thomas had hold of his jersey and made Kyrie late. And there was no call again. So, but yeah, LeBron's been great. He's going to have to be even greater. I will say, I don't know if you're going to ask me this. With LeBron, he was noticeably reserved yesterday and then a little down. And I don't know if it's because he knew the extent of Kevin's injury or if he just kind of realized what had happened, losing 2 guys probably to the start of the Bulls series. But LeBron is going to have the right mindset to carry this team forward. And, I hope that he gets that over the coming days.
All right, Joe, I was going to ask you that. I'm glad you went ahead and answered it yourself. Joe Vardon, part of our Cavaliers reporting team, also covers LeBron James. Joe, thanks for the time.
Oh, anytime.
All right, that was Joe Vardon. Chris Fedor was earlier, and as promised, we are going to track down Chris Haynes. We're going to have him on here momentarily. Cavaliers getting ready for a matchup with either the Bucks or the Bulls. You've heard a lot about that Kevin Love injury. We've asked both of our guests about that. And what it does to the Cavaliers in a potential matchup with Chicago. Because one of the edges that the Cavaliers had is they can take Kevin Love, put him in the corner, put him out on the wing, and Joakim Noah or Pau Gasol, whoever's guarding him, they've got to pay attention to that. They've got to know that Kevin Love is out there, and if you don't have him, and all of a sudden that guy is James Jones, yeah, James Jones can dry you out, but James Jones also can't hurt you down low like Kevin Love can. You lose that versatility. It completely changes this basketball team, and of course if J.R. Smith is not out there for a game or even 2 games, that's another shooter that you've lost. And the Cavaliers are one of these NBA teams that are built around shooting the three-pointer. They can certainly get to the rim. They can certainly drive. They can certainly penetrate. But they're a team that loves to shoot three-pointers. And that's what they do really, really well. Cavaliers and possibly the Bulls coming up. Again, that series could start on Saturday or Monday. It depends on if and when the Bulls close things out. All right, let's go ahead and finish this up by bringing in our Cavaliers beat reporter, Chris Haynes. Chris, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing fine now. I had a rough go this morning in Boston. Some personal issues going on over here, but I'm doing fine. I'm pretty sure the listeners don't care about my problems.
We do care, Chris. We care deeply. But we got to talk Cavaliers. And we got to talk about Kevin Love. We got to talk about the Kelly Olynyk situation. Did you think that was a dirty play by Olynyk?
Yeah, it was dirty, man. When I first saw it with the naked eye, it looked like they just got tangled up there. And an unfortunate situation just happened with Kevin Love's shoulder. But looking at the replay, looking at how Olynyk tugged at it, jerked it, twisted, it was, I'm not saying he intended to dislocate Love's shoulder, but I think he definitely meant harm. And, there's a lot of tactics that a lot of players do out there on the court. I mentioned it before, Chris Fedor he's known for hitting guys below the belt. Not to hurt them, but, to inflict a little pain just to get, have them thinking second twice. I mean, have them second guessing. But I think that's something that Olynyk was doing. And it's unfortunate, man, because it was a situation that could have been worse than what it was. I think Kevin Love's going to be out maybe a game, but it could have been bad. It could have been, even though the results aren't out yet, but I definitely could have been something worse than what happened.
And then, of course, on the Cavaliers' end, you had Kendrick Perkins come out, and he picked and sort of punched Jay Crowder. And then you had the J.R. Smith situation where he swung his arm back and hit Jay Crowder. Perkins, that's kind of what he's there for, I suppose. But J.R. Smith, it just feels like that's one of those situations, Chris, where he's got to know that the Cavs have more games to play and the Bulls don't. I'm sorry, not the Bulls, the Celtics.
No, definitely. And if you look at, the Cavs had the game. Even though the Celtics were, they got on the run, they had some momentum going, there was no doubt in anybody's mind that the Cavs weren't going to pull that game away. So even though Crowder was, bumping J.R. from the back and just being a nuisance, that's what he's been doing all series, J.R. should have kept his composure. And we can go back and forth on the Olynyk play. Was it intentional? Was it not? The J.R., I love J.R. to death, but he meant to knock that guy out. And he got a clean shot. He got a really clean shot and buckled the guy all the way down to the floor and forced the guy to come up with an ACL injury. And he has to be better than that. He's come a long way. He already has a reputation of being a loose cannon type of guy. So for him to do this right now at this stage, it's just a terrible situation for him to put his team in.
So now looking ahead, if the Cavaliers do take on the Bulls, you said you don't think Kevin Love will be out for more than maybe a game, maybe 2. J.R. Smith likely going to miss a game, maybe 2, due to suspension. What does that do to this basketball team?
It's going to cripple in the short term. Brett has to figure out a steady rotation along with inserting a couple of guys into the start lineup. And there's also a delicate balance with that. Do you just put, the obvious guy would be put Tristan Thompson in for Love, and then the obvious guy for Super Bowl position would be put Iman Shumpert in for J.R. Smith. But then look what that does to your bench. You basically, you're already one of the lowest scoring bench in the league. Then you go to being virtually embarrassing. So Brett is going to have to figure out. I expect probably Sean Marion may play some 4. And the thing about playing small ball Chicago is that they have a big front court. Joakim Noah, Kyle Gasol. So it's going to be a tough situation for the Cavs to get there, man. But the good thing about it is they do have two of the best players in the game still playing, Kyrie and LeBron James. So they'll be all right, but it's definitely going to be a tough situation.
Yeah, Chris, nobody's talking about the game Kyrie Irving had yesterday. On top of his scoring, he had 11 rebounds. Everybody's talking about Kevin Love. They're talking about LeBron James. But Kyrie Irving, I guess quietly, put together a pretty good first playoff series.
Well, nobody's talking about LeBron James' near triple-double either.
That's true.
That game was an afterthought. If you look at my game story, the game story I had at the buzzer, man, 90% of it was breaking down the fights, breaking down the altercations, breaking down the scuffles. And it was fun. I'll tell you that. I had fun writing that story. But, I think it was just a situation where I think everybody wants, even myself, I always talk about those old days of just playoff-style basketball, being physical. But there's still a line there. There's still a fine line playing hard, playing tough and physical, but also playing the game with some respect and responsibility. And I think that match, I think it bordered on atrocious if you look at how this league and Adam Silver wants this league to be portrayed. NBA has come a long way as far as, the reputation of the league and its players. And so to have a game like that, it kind of brings people memories back to that brawl in the Palace, even though it wasn't anything like that. But that's how some people start to take that.
All right, Chris Haynes, our Cavaliers beat reporter, joining us. Chris, thanks for the time.
Anytime, guys. Take care.
All right, so the Cleveland Cavaliers, they finish off Boston. They await the winner of Chicago-Milwaukee. Game 5 of that series is tonight. It's at 8 o'clock. It's on TNT. If you haven't been watching that series, you should watch that game. It's been a really fun series. We'll see if Milwaukee and Jason Kidd can extend it on the road now back in Chicago. My thanks to Chris Fedor, Joe Vardon, Chris Haynes, Dave Petkiewicz pushing the buttons and tracking people down for us. I'm Dan Labbe. This has been another edition of Cavs Insider. You can catch us following the Cavs' next game, whenever that'll be. Talk to you then.